Welcome to Political Arena. It's the 5th day in the month of November 2019. My name is Oludolapo Adewale, welcoming you to the program. Today we're taking a look at the NDDC. Precisely, we're looking at NDDC, forensic audit, transparency, as well as accountability. And joining me in this discussion, Tengi George Ikoli, the program coordinator, Nigerian National Resources Charter. What's your take on the Vox Pop?
I agree that one of the key things that have to be done is to ensure that transparency and accountability are enshrined in the way the NDDC is operated. I actually want to provide some slight context to say that this NDDC is the current vehicle, one of the current vehicles that are used to transfer benefits to those in the host communities in Niger Delta. However, this is not the first time that this has been done. It had been tried in 1960 with the Niger Delta Development Board, again in 1970, Niger Delta Basin Development Authority. After that, the UNPADEC in 1992, NDDC, Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs as well. So it's to say that there have been vehicles and there will be vehicles again if the right processes and procedures are not put in place. One of the commentators mentioned that there should be a monitoring mechanism, which is something that is essential to ensure that transparency and accountability hold. Otherwise, if those things are not put in place, transparency and accountability just become hot button words without any real effect. So one of the things that I know that the government has put different things in place, but a lot more needs to be done, and accountability in more practical terms needs to be demanded for, and I hope that we have that conversation.
Now, you took us down history lane of different agencies or different commissions that have been formed in Nigeria over time. Now, since 2000 till now, it's 19 years since the creation of NDDC. Can you give an overview of this NDDC and its operations? Let's just know what they're actually set up to do.
Okay, so NDDC, like its predecessor UNPADEC, was established in 2000, as you mentioned. The objective of the NDDC was to ensure that it facilitated the rapid, even, and sustainable development of the Niger Delta region that was supposed to be economically prosperous, socially stable, ecologically regenerative, and politically peaceful. From reading that out, which is, you already see that there are a lot of things that they don't have already. Economic prosperity is something that's few and far between. If you go to those Niger Delta region, they will tell you that they don't have enough jobs available. Their livelihoods are being taken away from them. They're not given alternatives. And what they find is they find other nefarious opportunities, which includes oil bunkering, breaking of pipelines, etc., socially stable, ecologically regenerative. You've heard about the situation with the suits that goes on in the Delta. So clearly that also NDC would have failed in that aspect. Politically peaceful. We have the PAP, the Presidential Amnesty Program, that was created to try to combat the restiveness in the Delta region. You do have a lot of incidences that still occur in terms of breaking of infrastructure, of all facilities and the like. So not enough has been done, and this is because we're not looking at the root of the problem. We're not interrogating NDDC and all these other vehicles appropriately, which is why the forensic audit is a positive thing in that regard, to try to make sure that we see what is actually going on, where the rots are, and try to fix those issues, and to make sure that NDDC is more effective in the way they operate.
Okay. While preparing for this program, I was actually trying to take an overview of the amnesty program we've seen in Nigeria. I remember that during former President Goodluck Jonathan's time, the amnesty program was really intensified. What do you think is the assessment of amnesty program in Nigeria as we stand currently, 2019?
The PAP was actually not supposed to be, was meant to be an interventionist program. It was not meant to last forever. It was meant to disarm those that were in the region. It was meant to rehabilitate them as well and to reintegrate them. Unfortunately, the reintegration aspect of things has not been completed. I know that there's still PAP going on, so it's a policy and sort of an objective if they can transition into making sure that those people, those unarmed citizens, are now transitioned into the workforce.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. In the case where they are not living up to expectation, what do you think can be done?
There are a few processes that are actually being considered. There is something called the SIWP, which is the Strategic Implementation Work Plan. What that means is that the government is trying to make sure that they understand and have on the books what projects are being implemented in Nigeria Delta, so what NDDC projects are committed, and making sure that those are implemented. So one of the issues that we always have as well in terms of transparency and holding responsible agencies accountable is knowing what organization, whether it be MNDA, NDDC, donor organizations, or whether it be other governments, maybe state government, for instance, what projects they have committed to do in these regions. What you would usually have is you'd have maybe multiple organizations committing to fix one road. So then in that situation, whatever stakeholders would believe that the road had been fixed, depending, they wouldn't even know who it was that had fixed it, if it was an IOC or whoever. So what they're trying to do is trying to make sure that it's very clear and it's known to all the stakeholders, to those in the communities, so that they can hold them responsible. So what is known can then be monitored. So that is pretty much what the SIWP is doing. Also involving the communities, because they know better as well what they need. So even just, we're looking at this NDDC conundrum and thinking about it in terms of a transparency issue, yes. But also what the NDDC is meant to do is meant to be responsive to local needs. So those that are in those regions, how are their needs being met? Do they require schools? Do they require boreholes? What do they actually need themselves, as opposed to just putting in projects there that do not necessarily fit their needs? So if they're involved in that conversation from the outset as to what they need, they will also be involved in monitoring and reporting effectively to those in maybe potentially the civil society organizations as well can be involved in that process to make sure that those projects are monitored and effectively implemented.
Okay, and I'd like you to look at different agencies within the state. For instance, in Ondo State, we know that there is Osopadek, which all the areas producing oil coming together under an agency. Do you think there's a synergy between NEDC and bodies like that in different states that are producing oil?
Okay, so that's exactly what I'm saying. There isn't enough coordination in terms of development in that region. So you have also all the decks, as we call them. You have the donor organizations as well. You have international oil companies also implementing the CSRs. Everyone is doing projects and there's no synergy, and there is not enough collaboration, not enough people talking to each other. So there's no transparency in that way, and so then it's difficult to hold them accountable. So what needs to be done, which is being done as far as I know at the presidency level, try and coordinate all these projects. The SIWP, which I mentioned, Strategic Implementation Work Plan, was going along fine, but it hasn't yet been approved by FEC.
All right.
So that's something that would be good for people to advocate for and to put their support behind, because in that way we would have more transparency and these sorts of issues that we're talking about now would be minimized.
Okay. All right, it's still Women Radio 91.7 and the program is Political Arena. Today we're looking at NDDC and we're trying to place the forensic audit as well as transparency and accountability in focus. All right, back to the conversation real quick. Let's go to Tengi now. And earlier you talked about the performance of NDDC, saying that they are not really as effective as they should actually be. Now, if something is not effective, then there are calls for overhauling of the whole process in the first place. So do you think NDDC do you think the time is ripe, even as it hits the 20th year mark, do you think the time is right for an overhaul of its operations?
Like I said, the reason I gave that initial context was to say that the reaction tends to be when there is an issue to scrap the organization. But as you see from the historical perspective I provided, that is not necessarily the solution, because you had an OMPADEC which was not working effectively either, set up in 1992, and then just a couple of years down the line 2000, you had NDDC, which essentially could be seen as a rebranding of sorts. So it's looking at the actual institution and ensuring that we address the issues that are within. We put those processes and procedures in place to make it more difficult for adverse actors to thrive. If you do that, then you can ensure that NDDC starts to work better. Or it could be a solution then also to create another institution. But the point is to make sure that it works effectively, to ensure that there is effective community and meaningful community participation, and the expectations are also managed to ensure that there's a trust. What I can say is that this is an advantage, an opportunity to create a system where you integrate more community involvement in the process to also increase their trust in the government, and also ensure that we bring it closer together so that the reason why these organizations are created, these institutions are created, are actually achieved.
Exactly. All right, Political Arena on Women Radio 91.7, and Tengi has been giving us insight into how the NDDC runs its operations, as well as some things that we need to know about the agency and the collaboration between NDDC and, of course, the state agencies. Now, I'm still taking you on that state as well as the NDDC. I know that the states under the NDDC, we have the states like Abia, Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa State, Cross River, Delta, Edo, Imo, Ondo, and of course River State. Let's again.
The big nine. The
big nine, exactly. I'd like us to do a little bit of assessment right now. Let's look at all the state. How has all the state do you think they've added a real development or underdevelopment? If we are to look at both sides right now, do you think they've added development or underdevelopment to the states?
I'm actually really glad that you've brought this aspect of the conversation into focus, because one of the things that tends to happen is that people ignore the responsibility of the states and instead always look to the federal government instruments. But the states do play a very pivotal role. They have that 30% derivation that comes to them. And there's not enough being done to monitor the effectiveness of those instruments as well. What are they doing? Do they have, I know that River State and Bayelsa at one point started a Sovereign Wealth Fund trying to save some monies from 13% to try and improve development in their states. I don't think those exist. Those still exist at this time. We don't have enough information as to what those states are doing, which is what we need to do. There's a lot of assessment saying, for instance, Lagos State does a lot better than all these oil-producing states in terms of IGR, even though those states get internally generated revenues. Despite the fact that all these other states get additional revenues from 30%. Lagos State has now discovered oil, the Ajay oil field. So the conversation there is also saying, will Lagos State allow itself to fall into the same situation?
And for the fact that there's a refinery going on, project going on.
Also exploration. So you have the Badagry people actually having some conversations now around that, saying there's some exploration being done around our area. What is going on? What are the plans that Lagos State has to try and ensure that what's going on does not happen here? How are they ensuring that development will also go on in this region? So that conversation is going on, and I hope that people listening will also have to ask those questions, because Lagos State has contributed such a lot to Nigerians' growth. So I cannot imagine Lagos State deteriorating to the situation that we have in Edo, for instance. So a lot needs to be done now. Start asking the question before we get too far down the line, to say what is being done, what are the state's responsibilities, and how can we ensure that we hold our state governments are more accountable.
And that's the word. Accountability is the word. 25 minutes gone past the hour of 2. The program is Political Arena, and of course we're looking at NDDC. NDDC is on the spotlight. Tengi, there's also something that caught my attention, and it's about people's school of thought. It appeared that there was a blame game trying to be done here. Now people are looking at who failed in its responsibility. Is it the governing body of the commission, or the government that failed in its responsibility towards the commission? Who should be blamed here? Should we even have the blame game in the first instance?
Obviously, I've been saying this already throughout the conversation, but my view is not to blame as such. I mean, those that will blame will do. Obviously, people need to be held accountable. But before, my view is always to, now that we have addressed this issue, now that there's a spotlight on this conversation and the practice of NDDC, let's ensure that this is where the buck stops and we do not continue on, because we can't have a conversation and then have it die down again. We need to make sure that at this point on, that we ensure that those processes are in place, and from now on it doesn't happen again. Because there is a tendency to talk about the issue, it becomes a hot button issue, everyone is like interested what's going on, and then we get distracted. And then there are no real solutions that are put in place. So what I would advocate for and what I'm interested in is to make sure that now we put those processes in place and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
True. It's all getting very interesting, because people always want to place the bulk on a particular table, saying that these people have to be held accountable for this particular thing happening. Now, it brings to my attention, you actually mentioned something earlier about CSR, that's corporate social responsibilities of all the state government, of all the state agencies, and all that.
That's actually the for the oil companies. Yes.
For the oil companies. Okay. Yes. Now, I also saw some things online about some projects that were commissioned in some of these oil-producing states, and they leave little to be desired, really. Sometimes you see bridges being built, bridges. When I mean bridges, there I mean like Paco bridges. I don't know whether you know Paco really in Yoruba language. So, and they commission it as big projects, and it's kind of worrisome. Are these the kind of things that we see happening in remote places, places where this oil is really being explored and coming out from? What do you think the people of the area can do to actually hold the government accountable, or the agencies accountable for such things like that?
Again, which is where something like the SIWP will be very sort of necessary, but also what the government can help to do as well is to have that transparency around. I know that the budget for NDDC, first of all, is not publicly available, which is an issue. If that is made publicly available, people can monitor those budgets, the projects that are expected to be implemented as well. If we have that, for instance, we can then know what to do. Secondly, like I said before, there are some projects that are put in place that have nothing to do with the communities. The communities don't need them, they will not use them, and it will not add to their lives, which is the objective, which is the essence.
So is there a way that the community can present it to them, saying that this is our scale of preference, this is what we want first, or do it in order of our preference, this is what we need so much? Can they table that to the development commissions?
We're aware that actually you have, in the different communities, they have different structures already available. So they have their town hall meetings, they have their different groups, women's groups, elders groups, youth groups, and all these other groups as well, who can then table those needs before the Commission and all these other organizations. Actually, the IOCs, which is International Oil Companies, they have this framework called a General Memorandum of Understanding, which they essentially use to dialogue with the community members, find out what their needs are, and then implement projects along those lines. If the government can also adopt similar framework, it would go a long way to ensuring this. I know that there was the Petroleum Host Community Bill, which had integrated that aspect of it, to say that local communities could also provide, to have a voice, community members could have a voice to actually say what their needs are. However, even in that bill, it was very minimal participatory role, but it was the beginning of something. Obviously, it wasn't passed, and it wasn't even considered beyond the National Assembly. They didn't pass it themselves during the 8th Assembly. But these are sort of instruments and things that could be put in place that could help communities have a voice in that space.
Exactly. All right, Tengi has been giving us interesting angles to our topic of today, and it's all about the NDDC. We're looking at the forensic audit, transparency and accountability on the program this afternoon from the Niger Development area, Niger Delta Development area. You can also give us insight and or like on-the-spot assessment of what you think is going on in your area. Let us know all about it on the program this afternoon. Okay, back to Tengi. There was a particular statement made by Senator Godswill Akpabio. I would like to read it to you. He said that so much money has been given to the NDDC over the years, but nothing commensurate is on ground to show the huge government's investment in the Commission and in the region as a whole. Okay, first off, my question is, do you agree with the statement? Now, the second side of this story is that what do you think are the processes that need to be in place, apart from the SEEP you talked about? What are the other processes you think should be in place to ensure that transparent and accountable operations are done in the NDDC?
Okay, with the statement you said, a lot can always be done better. That's my response to that. I know that a lot of funds have been put into the NDC, and we haven't seen commensurate development. Really, that's always been a problem. Because Niger Delta people would not agitate if they had access to jobs, they had access to education, access to healthcare facilities. If development as such was seen, effectively the issue that we have prevailing there will not be the case. I've already mentioned different instruments that I think that could be used to improve transparency. One is a monitoring framework, which will be very useful. One is a communication strategy as well as framework for NDC. Communication strategy in the sense of saying that if people understand what the expectations are, what is going on there, they'll be better able to engage. Sometimes we find that it's a lack of information as opposed to a lack of activity. So if that is put in place as well, people, interested stakeholders will understand what specific issues that they should actually focus on and which ones are not necessary because they're already being done. And then also the monitoring framework, getting the civil society in the region involved with both the federal, so the federal framework, so the agency, the MNDA, NDDC practices, also at the state level to figure out and to assess what their budgets are and how they're implementing and using 13% derivation. Also at the local level, what are the local governments also doing, because they are the first line of communication with the communities. So the question is, how are all these different levels of government interventions, how are they being monitored and engaged? So we have to have a clear monitoring framework. This has to be made available to the people and the stakeholders and the civil society, and then everyone can together monitor the progress and then be able to better hold these organizations accountable.
All right, true. And one thing that has been resonating in your comments is that we need to have a clear monitoring framework to ensure that things are done rightly. In case you just joined us, the program is Political Arena. And today we're looking at NDDC, forensic audit, transparency and accountability. And of course, the person that's been doing justice to this topic has been Tengi George Ikoli. She's a program coordinator, Nigerian National Resources Charter. And of course, you can be part of the conversation too this afternoon. Call us on 07000 917 917 090 256 25455. Send a text message to 0703 1756 537. You can also send it to the same number on WhatsApp, and we'll be glad to read your messages. Okay, I'm still very much here with my guest on the phone, and I'd like us to also look at the 16-member board of the NDDC. The senators already commenced the screening of the 16-member board of this commission. It was President Buhari that actually requested for that screening. Now, let's take a look at the nominees right now. Would you say they are capable of coordinating the affairs of the commission effectively?
I don't have access to all their CVs and their credentials. I would say at this point just to trust, I guess, the process. Okay. So I'd have to just leave that up to, those who are able and capable of doing so.
Okay, so we just wait and see whether or not they will live up to expectation. And
I guess also to figure out what their credentials are and, to interrogate the process, but again, to see what they're capable of doing. So again, like I said, and I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's important to see if the processes and institutions are strengthened and everything is made clear and transparent. It will be difficult for people to be inadequate, and then those who do not live up to expectations or their duties will be kicked out, I think, naturally, if the processes and the institution itself is strengthened.
All right. There were agitations recently about some people not having merit to actually be a member of the board, and some Nigerians in different states were actually protesting. Do you think that their points are valid? Do you think some section of the state, the citizens of the state, do you think they can actually protest against the nomination of one person from their state or not?
Is the thing called free speech? No. So everyone has the right to speak up about issues that they find to be problematic.
Okay. Let's look at finance right now. Do you think that there's been transparency in the running of the affairs of the Commission with specific attention to the finance? We know that there is this 3 trillion naira that was alleged to have been missing, and Dr. Cairo Jugbo is raising the alarm right now, saying, I beg your pardon, saying that a 7th senator is in the midst of all this. What's your take on the transparency as regards finance in NDDC?
For NDDC, the Commission is expected to be funded through federal government contribution of equivalent of 15%. Of the month's statutory allocation due to Niger Delta, 3% of total budget of oil and gas producing companies, 50% of ecological fund due to Niger Delta states, aid, and etc. And one thing I already mentioned is that NDDC's budget is not routinely published, and actually they're notoriously known for not disclosing their budget. A lot of defense civil society organizations have made attempts to interrogate this issue and this area a couple of times, and have always been sort of restricted by that. So that's pretty much what the financial scope of NDC has been, which is why I said that it'll be helpful if that is revealed and made to be more public. And so with that in mind, people will be able to better interrogate how their funds are spent.
All right. We heard that.
Just to say though, this is just about the NRC really. So Nigerian Natural Resource Charter is the organization with which I'm the program coordinator for. But NNRC is an easier way to say it as opposed to trying to say the name all the time.
I didn't get that.
Well, I said Nigerian Natural Resource Charter, the organization which I'm the program coordinator for.
Okay.
NNRC is the acronym, so it might be easier to say that.
Okay, NNRC. NNRC. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, let's still take more on this particular issue because it's something that cannot be dissected and finished in a day, really. There's also an allegation against the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, talking about Senator Godswill Akpabio. A group, Delta Youth Renaissance, they accused him of incompetence and corruption for the 1.9 billion water ISINT contracts that was executed under the watch of the minister. Now, what's the way forward? After all said and done, let's now try to chart a way forward. What's the way forward since there's been several revelations on misappropriation of fund in the Niger Delta Development Commission, especially with this recent accusation to Senator Akpabio?
I would say open the books. Let civil society interrogate. Let's see where the issues are, and let's just call up the rot and restart how we look at NDC, how we interrogate with it, and to ensure that it doesn't continue on as it has always done. And also the SIWP, let's try and advocate for that to be approved by FEC.
Interesting, especially from Nigerians and the government angle. What do you think should be done to make sure that this life, especially when it comes to the oil producing areas in Nigeria, is better for everyone?
Okay. I will say though that the NNRC, the organization which I work with, has been very interested in this area, and what we've done over the years is we've conducted assessments, sort of looking at how the revenues, looking at how the economic social and environmental impacts of extraction have been minimized by the government. And what has been done there pretty much. So what we've done is produce reports where we have sort of a summary of what's going on, and we've produced briefs to show what we think should be done, how these things should be improved upon. So one of the things that we've consistently said around NDDC and all these other institutions is that they need to be better monitored. Interventions need to be put in place to improve how all these organizations work. Local content, board, for instance, NCMDB, does some work around that area. So all the work that they do has to be made open and public to the people of Niger Delta. All spills, which I know this is not something that we're talking about today, have to be seriously addressed to ensure that the environmental situation there is also better treated and treated as a matter of urgency. One of the conversations that we don't always have is actually that the oil is not as attractive anymore. There are more players in the field. We have, maybe when Nigeria first found oil in the 60s, there were a lot less players. Now there are a lot more players. Exactly. And the world is also looking away from oil to other sources of energy. And so if anything is going to be done, it should be done now, because the revenue might be depleted. Diversification, as the conversation has always been going on, has not really manifested as such. So what we need to do is make sure that now that we have those revenues, is to make sure that institutions like NDDC, MNDA, High Prep, NCMDB, all institutions that have been created to transfer benefits to those in that region are effectively managed.
True. Thank you very much. The program coordinator at Nigerian National Resources Charter, NNRC, Tenki George Ikoli. Nice to have you on the program, Political Arena.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for your time, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Will do, you too. Thank you.
WFM 91.7.